All right, market futures are up this morning. This after President Trump backed off a new threat of 50% tariffs on the EU, which he made after pulling back on a threat of reciprocal tariffs that he made on the EU, which he first made on Liberation Day. So he threatened them, he backed off, he re-threatened them, and he backed off, if you're keeping score at home right now. So how clear do voters think the president is on the issue of tariffs? One man has the answer. CNN chief data analyst Harry Enten. Crystal clear, Harry, right?
I got to admit, while you were reading that back, I was confused, and I'm supposed to know this stuff. And you know what, Johnny B? The voters, they are confused too. Trump, a clear plan for tariffs and trade. The majority answer here is no. Donald Trump does not have a clear plan for tariffs and trade. This is the one thing that perturbs voters and the markets more than anything else. It's not whether or not you put tariffs on or not. It's whether you are going to actually do it and stick to your guns. The American public does not believe that Donald Trump sticks to his guns. 55% say no, he does not have a clear plan for trades and tariffs. And I will note, of course, the center of the electorate, the all-important independent vote, 64% of independents say no. Donald Trump does not have a clear plan for trade and tariffs. And I will note that this no number has been creeping up, according to CBS News YouGov. So as Donald Trump's presidency go on, the American people think he's becoming less clear over time.
Harry, if only there were a way to measure the level of uncertainty that people feel.
Yeah, if only there were a way. It turns out there is a way. Okay, Trade Policy Uncertainty Index. Get this, compare now to last year at this time. The Trade Policy Uncertainty Index, through the roof, up 846% versus a year ago. They have been looking at this index going all the way back. You go all the way back to 1960. It is higher now than in any month prior to 2025. We just are consistently breaking records this year, whereby it seems the further along we go, the more uncertainty there is in terms of the trade policy in this country. So the voters are thinking one thing, and the reason that they are thinking one thing, that is that Donald Trump does not have a clear plan for trade and tariffs, is because, simply put, it doesn't seem, at least according to this metric, that he does. So everything is kind of matching up here, whereby the voters are agreeing with what the anecdotes are saying, which is what the actual policy is. That is, there is tremendous uncertainty.
846% is usually outside the margin of error. Just saying.
Just a little bit.
All right. So I mentioned that the president backed off his most recent threat of 50% tariffs on the EU. Frankly, I've lost track of where he is on the tariffs he threatened on Apple.
Yeah.
But picking on Apple and the EU, which he did in one single day last week, it was Friday. What's special about those particular targets?
Yeah, I think the thing that's going on here is that Donald Trump is picking on folks who are very important in terms of the American economy. What are we talking about? Well, what is number one in America? What's the number one smartphone in America? It is the iPhone, 155 million active units alone. It's the number one smartphone in America. How about what's the number one trade partner to the United States of America? It's the European Union. 4.9% of U.S. GDP in 2024 is because of the trade with the European Union. So when Donald Trump is threatening these two companies, Apple, and then, of course, not the European Union, it's not a company, but these two entities, what's essentially going on is he is threatening the U.S. economy, and that is why we've seen the markets do a little bit of this.
Keep going. All right, good. That made coming in today worthwhile. Harry Enten, thank you very much for all of that. Kate?
You totally read my mind. I was like, how long will it go? All right, Harry, you can stop now.
A trade loophole closed on Friday, and it could have a massive impact for American consumers. You see, millions of Americans, they have flocked to sites like Temu and Shein, drawn in by some of these Chinese e-commerce sites, I should say, by some of those extremely low prices and a big variety of products. And that's partially because of the de minimis exemption, which allowed packages worth less than $800 to enter the U.S. duty-free. Well, that exemption actually expired on May 2nd, and prices, they have already soared on some of these sites in recent weeks. Temu, for example, they ended shipments from China to the U.S. and only fulfilling American orders from within that country, also imposing some of these new tariffs and duties. Well, that has led to some shipping delays, and all of this is happening amid the uncertainty of Donald Trump's trade war. At one point, the U.S. had imposed a tariff of 145% on Chinese goods. That's been temporarily reduced for most goods to 30%. So what does all this mean? Let's explore all of this with exactly what this means for Chinese e-commerce platforms and American consumers that shop there. Joining us is Yao Henry Jin. He's an associate professor of supply chain management at Miami University, joining us live from Westchester, Ohio. Professor, thank you for getting up early for us.
Not a problem at all. Thanks for having me.
So we've heard some folks refer to this as a sort of tariff ceasefire agreement, this break from these tariffs. This exemption also allowed companies like Shein and Temu to really thrive until that loophole was done away with. What do you think has fueled the Trump administration's desire to go after these specific companies that are providing some pretty low-cost goods like apparel to American consumers?
Well, so for one thing, the sheer volume of these goods that have been coming across the border in recent years have really left a large portion of goods, especially in things like apparel, that are rather heavily taxed, if you will, for imports. And these have not been levied any duties on. And for the most part, consumers were benefiting from being able to pay, to your point, lower prices, much lower than what they otherwise would have had to pay at a store like Forever 21 or some of the other fast fashion goods where retailers import in large volumes and that they do have to pay these import tariffs on. And so for Donald Trump, part of going after the de minimis is really an extension from the Biden era when our policymakers started to pay attention to say, hey, we have all of these packages coming through the border that is clogging up our customs, and a lot of times we have no way of tracing what is exactly inside these packages.
So if the U.S. market is no longer an option, where do you think these low-cost Chinese manufacturers will turn to, Professor? Is it hard to replace consumers in the U.S.?
Absolutely. So from consumers' perspective, the U.S. consumers have outsized spending power compared to many other consumer markets. And so in regard to being able to find consumers who are willing to pay a certain level of prices for their goods, yes, U.S. consumers are difficult to replace. Now, what we've also been seeing is these companies have been pivoting towards markets like Australia, like the EU, which is also the reason why we start to see these countries trying to coordinate a response towards what's the so-called low-valued goods coming across the border.
Let's talk about what's next, Professor, especially for this business model that companies like Temu have relied on, which is essentially provide this vast selection of direct-to-consumer products at a cheap price. I mean, I've seen some reporting out there that this could potentially spell the end of fast fashion. Is that the case in the Trump tariff world?
No, not at all. I do not believe that this is going to spell the end of fast fashion. What it is going to spell is the end of this particular type of fast fashion that Shein is offering. Because if you think about fast fashion as a category, it really didn't start with Shein. Instead, it started with companies like Zara and H&M, and they have been thriving, and they did thrive even during the era of the de minimis goods coming across the border. And so what it ultimately means is retailers like Shein and Temu, they're going to have to adapt to basically a new reality. Now, what we have started to see is that Shein has been shipping goods across directly from China into the U.S. even after the closure of the de minimis loophole. And for Temu, in recent weeks, Temu actually started to resume some of their direct from China shipments into the U.S. And so what we know is certain categories, even with the 30%, 54%, and up tariffs, they're still viable as far as serving the U.S. consumer market is concerned. What we've also seen is Temu has really shifted to this Amazonification model where, as you mentioned earlier, that they open up US-based warehouses for local shipping. And so the closure of this de minimis loophole is not necessarily going to spell the end of Temu and Shein in the United States, But what it will do is we're going to see fewer selection, and we're going to see higher prices and possibly slower service speed when it comes to packages being shipped directly from China.
This new reality that you described, Professor, it'll be interesting to see if perhaps retailers like H&M, for example, see this more as an evening of the playing field with the removal of this loophole. Professor, we have to leave it there, but just some fascinating insight, especially for so many people in the United States to turn to these sites to fill their closets up. Professor Yao, Henry Jin, really appreciate your expertise.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.